Elias locked every bolt, but the nauseating smell of rot and the prickling sensation of a gaze burning into his back told him the truth. He was not alone. He had moved into the apartment on the second floor of the dilapidated fourplex 3 weeks ago. It was a desperate decision born of tuition hikes and a dwindling bank account. The landlord, a man named Mr. Gallo who possessed the emotional range of a slab of concrete, had waved off Elias's initial concerns about the damp patches on the ceiling and the faint, sweet-sour odor that permeated the hallway. "Old pipes?" Gallo had grunted, handing over a set of sticky keys. "And do not mind the noise. Old buildings settle." But buildings did not breathe. Buildings did not shift their weight when you held your breath. It was 3:17 a.m. when Elias snapped awake, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The silence of the room was heavy, oppressive, like the air inside a tomb. But it was the smell that choked him. It was no longer a faint background nuisance. It was a thick, physical presence, tasting of copper and spoiled meat, coated his tongue. He sat up, clutching the thin duvet to his chest, his eyes darting around the shadows of his bedroom. That was when he saw it. The ventilation grate near the floor, the one he had meticulously sealed with 3 layers of duct tape the day he moved in, was lying on the carpet. The tape had been peeled back, not from the outside but pushed from within. The dark, rectangular maw of the ventilation shaft gaped open, exhaling that cold, putrid stench directly into his room. Elias froze. His instinct screamed at him to run. His phone was on the nightstand. He could grab it, bolt through the front door, and run until his lungs burned. He could leave the keys, the deposit, the cheap furniture, and never look back. It was the rational choice. It was the survivor's choice. But then he thought of the crushing weight of his student loans, the humiliation of sleeping on his friend's couch, and the condescending smirk Mr. Gallo had given him when he mentioned the drafty windows. If he ran now because of a loose vent and a bad smell, he was crazy. It was probably a rat. A massive, dead rat that had finally bloated enough to push the grate loose. If he ran, he lost everything. If he stayed and fixed it, he regained control. "It's just a rat," Elias whispered, the sound of his own voice sounding foreign and trembling in the darkness. "Just a damn rat." He threw the covers off. The floor was freezing against his bare feet. He reached under the bed and his fingers closed around the cold metal of a heavy Maglite flashlight he kept for emergencies. It felt solid, a reassuring weight in a world that felt increasingly fluid and unstable. He stood up, his knees shaking slightly, and walked toward the dark hole in the wall. The smell grew stronger with every step, a physical wall of decay that made his stomach turn. He gripped the flashlight like a club. He needed to see. He needed to know. He could not sleep another night in this place wondering what was scratching behind the drywall. He crouched down, the joints of his knees popping in the silence. He took a deep breath, held it, and raised the flashlight. "All right," he muttered. "Let us see you." He clicked the light on and thrust the beam into the darkness of the shaft. He expected fur. He expected a skeletal carcass. He expected sewage pipes or insulation. Instead, the beam cut through the dust and illuminated a face. It was pressed deep into the recess of the wall, wedged between 2 studs. It was not an animal. It was a human face, coated in grime and gray dust. The skin was pulled taut over sharp cheekbones, pale as paper. But it was the eyes that stopped Elias's heart. They were wide, bloodshot, and frantic. And they were alive. Elias gasped, stumbling back, the flashlight beam wavering wildly. The eyes in the wall did not blink. They just stared, filled with a horrific, pleading intensity. Before Elias could scream, before he could scramble to his feet and sprint for the door, a loud metallic clack echoed from the hallway. It was the sound of the heavy deadbolt on his front door sliding into place. Elias whipped his head toward the entrance. He had not locked the deadbolt from the inside. He never did, afraid of fire. Someone was outside. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded Elias's system. He scrambled backward on his hands and feet, Crab walking away from the vent until his back hit the frame of his bed. "Who's there?" He shouted toward the front door, his voice cracking. "Open the door." He scrambled up and threw himself at the entrance, grabbing the handle. It turned, but the door did not budge. The external deadbolt, a feature he had thought odd when he moved in, a lock that could be controlled from the hallway, was engaged. He pounded on the wood. "Gallo, I know it's you. Open this damn door." Silence answered him. Then, heavy, deliberate footsteps creaked on the floorboards of the hallway, moving away from his door and toward the stairwell. The landlord was not staying to chat. He had secured the perimeter. Elias was trapped. A scraping sound from behind him made his blood run cold. He spun around, pressing his back against the locked door, raising the flashlight again. The thing in the wall was moving. A hand, skeletal and long-fingered, reached out of the vent opening. The fingernails were overgrown, thick and yellow, curling like talons. They clawed at the carpet, dragging the rest of the body forward. It moved with a jerky, unnatural rhythm, like a marionette with tangled strings. "Stay back," Elias warned, brandishing the flashlight. I have a weapon." The figure did not seem to care, or perhaps did not understand. It squeezed its shoulders through the small opening. The sound of popping joints echoed in the room. It was a man, or what used to be a man. He was naked, his body caked in filth and sores. His ribs protruded so sharply they looked ready to pierce his translucent skin. Elias watched in paralyzed horror as the man pulled his hips through the vent and collapsed onto the bedroom rug. The smell was unbearable now, a concentrated cloud of ammonia and rotting garbage that made Elias gag. The intruder lay panting on the floor, his breath wheezing through fluid-filled lungs. Elias realized with a jolt of revulsion that the thumping he had heard for weeks, the sounds he attributed to pipes, had been this man crawling through the crawl spaces and service tunnels of the building. "What do you want?" Elias whispered, inching along the wall toward the window. "Money? I do not have any money." The emaciated man slowly lifted his head. In the harsh light of the flashlight, Elias saw the collar. It was a thick strip of dirty leather buckled tight around the man's scrawny neck. Hanging from it was a small, tarnished brass bell. The man opened his mouth to speak, but only a wet, guttural gurgle came out. He pointed a shaking finger at his open mouth. Elias shined the light closer, his curiosity warring with his disgust. The inside of the man's mouth was a cavern of scar tissue. His tongue was gone. It had been severed at the root, leaving only a stump that twitched uselessly. Elias felt the room spin. This was not a squatter. This was not a random junkie who had found a way in. This was a prisoner. The man began to crawl toward Elias, not with aggression, but with a terrifying, desperate need. He reached out, his bony fingers grasping at the air. Elias backed into the corner near the window. "Do not touch me," he whimpered. "Please." The man stopped. He looked at Elias, then pointed to his stomach. He made a scooping motion with his hand, bringing it to his mouth. He was starving. Elias looked at the vent, then back at the man. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The smell, the rotting smell that Elias had complained about for weeks, was not the man himself. It was the garbage, the scraps. Gallo had not been fixing pipes. He had been dropping food into the wall voids from the unit above. But something had changed. The supply had stopped. The pet had grown desperate enough to break through the tape. Elias gripped the window latch. He had to get out. He had to get the police. He wrestled with the lock, but years of paint and rust had fused it shut. He slammed the palm of his hand against the frame, screaming in frustration. The man on the floor let out a high-pitched whine. He was pointing at the ceiling, his eyes wide with renewed terror. Elias stopped struggling with the window and looked up. Above them, the floorboards of the third-floor apartment, the one Gallo claimed was empty, creaked. Dust rained down. Heavy boots were walking directly above Elias's head. Then the sound of a door opening upstairs. Then the heavy, rhythmic thud of steps coming down the stairs. Gallo was coming back. The footsteps stopped right outside Elias's door. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Elias stood frozen, the flashlight shaking in his hand, the beam dancing over the miserable creature huddled on his rug. The key turned in the lock. Elias raised the heavy flashlight, adrenaline flooding his veins. He was cornered. He would fight. He had to. The door swung open. Mr. Gallo stood in the doorway. He was a massive man, wearing gray coveralls stained with grease and dark patches that Elias now recognized were not oil. He held a red metal toolbox in one hand and a coiled length of rope in the other. His expression was one of mild annoyance, like a janitor called to clean up a spill in aisle 4. "You let him out," Gallo said, his voice a low rumble. He did not look at Elias. His eyes were fixed on the emaciated man on the floor. "Bad form, Elias. Really bad form." "Get away from me," Elias warned, backing up until his legs hit the radiator. "I know what you did. I know about him." Gallo stepped into the room and closed the door behind him, locking it again. "You do not know anything, kid. You just know what you see." The landlord looked down at the prisoner. "Marcus," he said sharply. "Back, now." The emaciated man, Marcus, whimpered. He curled into a ball, covering his head with his arms, the bell on his collar jingling softly, a cheerful sound that made the scene infinitely more grotesque. "He starving," Elias spat, trying to sound braver than he felt. "You cut out his tongue. You a monster." Gallo sighed, setting the toolbox down on Elias's desk. He opened it, revealing not wrenches or screwdrivers, but surgical shears, a staple gun, and a heavy hammer. "He not starving because I want him to," Gallo said, picking up the hammer. "He starving because the meat got expensive. Inflation, you know? And he been naughty, making noise, disturbing the good tenants like yourself." Gallo took a step toward Elias. "I told you the unit above was vacant. It is. Marcus here. He lives in the spaces between. The crawl space. The vents. He keeps the rats away. He serves a purpose." "I'm going to scream," Elias said. "The neighbors will hear." "The neighbors?" Gallo chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "Mrs. Higgins is deaf. And the guy in 1B, he supplies the meat. Who do you think you going to call?" Elias looked at Marcus. The prisoner peered through his arms, his eyes locking with Elias's. There was no hope there. Only an apology. Gallo swung the rope. "Now I have a dilemma. Marcus is spoiled. He has seen the light. He has tasted the carpet. He would not want to go back in the wall." Gallo looked at Elias, a slow smile spreading across his face. "But there's always a vacancy in the crawl space. And you look healthy, young. You last a long time on scraps." The realization washed over Elias, colder than the winter air. This was not a murder. This was a recruitment. Gallo did not want to kill him. He wanted to replace Marcus. "No," Elias whispered. "Yes," Gallo said, lunging forward. Elias swung the flashlight with all his might, connected with Gallo's shoulder with a sickening crunch. The landlord grunted, stumbling back, but he did not fall. He was immense, a wall of muscle and malice. He lashed out, his heavy hand catching Elias across the face. Elias flew backward, crashing into the desk. The lamp shattered. Taste of blood filled his mouth. He looked up to see Gallo looming over him, raising the hammer. "Do not worry," Gallo whispered. "The tongue comes out first, so you do not scream while you heal." Time seemed to slow down. Elias saw the rust on the hammerhead. He saw the dull, dead look in Gallo's eyes. He saw Marcus, the previous tenant, uncurling from his ball on the floor. For a second, Elias thought Marcus was going to attack Gallo, that the victim would rise up and save him. But Marcus did not attack. He scrambled toward the open vent. He was fleeing back into the walls. He was choosing the hell he knew over the violence of the landlord. He was leaving Elias alone. It was a moment of absolute clarity. There was no hero. There was no justice. There was only the predator and the prey. Elias's hand brushed against the heavy wooden chair he used for his desk. Gallo was slow, confident in his dominance. He raised the hammer higher for a finishing blow. Elias did not try to block. He did not try to stand. He grabbed the legs of the chair and thrust it upward with every ounce of hysterical strength he possessed. The chair legs slammed into Gallo's gut and groin. The giant man doubled over, exhaling a rush of air, the hammer clattering to the floor. Elias did not wait to see if he was incapacitated. He scrambled up, ignoring the spinning of the room, and grabbed the chair again. He did not hit Gallo. He swung the chair around and smashed it through the bedroom window. The glass exploded outward. The cold night air rushed in, sharp and clean, cutting through the stench of the apartment. "You little sh*T!" Gallo roared, struggling to straighten up. Elias looked at the drop. Second floor. Concrete below. A small awning over the entrance, maybe 6 feet down. He did not think. He did not hesitate. He vaulted onto the sill. "Get back here!" Gallo lunged, his fingers brushing Elias's ankle. Elias jumped. For a second he was flying. Then he hit the awning. It was old canvas and rotted wood. It did not hold him. He tore through it, tumbling in a mess of fabric and debris, and slammed onto the concrete porch below. A sickening crack echoed through the quiet street. Pain, white-hot and blinding, exploded in his left ankle. Elias screamed, curling into himself. He rolled off the porch into the dirt of the front lawn. He looked at his foot. It was twisted at a wrong angle. Broken. Badly. But he was out. He dragged himself through the grass, gasping, sobbing, pulling his body toward the streetlights. He needed to get to the road. He needed a car. He needed anyone. He reached the sidewalk and collapsed, rolling onto his back, staring up at the building that had almost consumed him. The light was on in his bedroom window. Elias watched, his vision blurring with tears and pain. A figure appeared in the broken window. It was Gallo. He was not rushing down the stairs to finish the job. He was not calling the police. He was holding a piece of plywood. Calmly, methodically, Mr. Gallo placed the board over the shattered window. Then came the sound of the hammer. Bang, bang, bang. He was sealing the breach. Elias watched as the light from his room was extinguished, blocked out by the wood. The apartment was sealed again. A low moan escaped Elias's lips as he heard a faint sound from the second floor, muffled by the new board but still audible in the silence of the night. It was the jingling of a bell. Marcus was back in the wall, and now he had the entire apartment to himself. Elias dragged himself further down the street, the sound of the hammer fading behind him, but the knowledge settling deep in his bones. He had escaped the room, but a part of him, the part that believed the world was safe, that walls were solid, that people were human, had been left behind in the dark, trapped in the ventilation shaft, waiting for the next tenant to move in.